That little boy in India, after doing long periods of meditation, ended up becoming violent. I want to talk to you today about the dark side of meditation that is said to be calming, energizing. Supposedly it makes people more productive to focus and to be calmer in your daily life. That's the hype, right? Well, let's have a look. First one I want to show you is a 200-year-old quote from a supposed Zen master, a meditation master, okay? Here we go. This person is introducing what they call Zen sickness. This is a known thing in the culture where meditation basically was birthed, okay? These are the words of this Zen master. My legs and feet were always ice cold. They felt as though they were immersed in tubs of snow. There was a constant buzzing in my ears, as if I was walking beside a raging mountain torrent. I became abnormally weak and timid, shrinking and fearful in whatever I did. I felt totally drained, physically and mentally exhausted. Strange visions appeared to me during waking and sleeping hours alike. My armpits were always wet with perspiration. My eyes watered constantly. I traveled far and wide, visiting wise Zen teachers, seeking out noted physicians, but none of the remedies they offered brought me any relief. I want to let you hear from a modern day. Now, keep in mind that meditation is part of the yogic practices. It's part of yoga, okay? First, he talks about how it can mess with your body, but I'm not going to go into that part. The idea is that they believe that this Kundalini spirit or serpent spirit is rising up through your body, through your spinal cord and our spinal column, and that it's opening up body chakras along the way, these centers in the body. And this guy's saying that it can even burn out parts of your liver, your kidneys, your eyes, your brain. Listen to this, though.
Our lunatic asylums basically are filled up with people who've practiced yoga wrongly.
Wrongly. That's what they all say. The people that want to keep practicing it, the people that want to promote it, they're constantly saying that the only people who get hurt are the people who do this wrongly. However, that was a Zen master who I just read to you the quote about what happened to him, his own writings about what happened to him. I'm pretty sure he wasn't doing it wrongly. This was a guy who knew what he was doing. This is from the National Library of Medicine. This is from a government website, okay? Meditation-induced psychosis. Little is known about adverse events. Wow. A sampling of methods. A male patient is described who developed an acute and transient psychosis. That's a psychosis that would come and go with polymorphic symptomology after meditating. A literature search for psychotic states related to meditation was carried out on PubMed, Embase, and PsycInfo. Results. In the case presented, a diagnosis of acute polymorphic psychotic disorder was made. Other case reports dealt with either a relapse of a pre-existent psychotic disorder or with a brief psychotic reaction in patients without a psychiatric history. Patients without a psychiatric history. Now, a lot of these people are going to tell you, when you start delving into this, right, when you start looking into it, you see a lot of people trying to justify the continued use of these practices that come from Eastern religions, right? They continue to say that, it's just a small percentage of people that are hurt by this. Well, if 1 in 4 is considered small, and in some cases the number is as high as 64% that said that they had negative reactions, okay, bad reactions. I'm going to read a couple of those to you right now. This one, these are both on Reddit for some reason, but they're looking for help, okay, on Reddit. This person starts off saying that they're not trying to scare people. They don't want to discourage people from meditating, right? But they want them to be aware. And then they claim that everything has two sides. Well, a good side and a bad side. Well, that's not true for every practice. That really is not true. There's no bad side to prayer. There's no to actual real prayer. Contemplative, quote unquote prayer, which is not prayer at all. It's just basically regurgitated pagan meditation that's painted to have a so-called Christian face. It's made to look outwardly Christian, but it's not. It never was. It came from these contemplative and meditative practices from the Greeks and from the Eastern religions. Okay, so this person, they ended up, though they said they had positive things that happened to them, they said they ended up quitting meditation after they began experiencing a negative side. This person has been doing advanced meditation, whatever that is. So presumably they had teachers that taught them the quote right way to do it, correct? They're doing advanced meditation, and they've been doing it for a while. But suddenly they start having these reactions, and they're really upset about it. They claim that the bandwidth of consciousness, they're making claims about why they experience the things that they experience without really knowing why. They're being told that your bandwidth of consciousness increases, but that's just somebody's explanation. Nobody actually knows what's happening. There's been no studies to determine exactly what is happening with the brain when this happens, okay? I think some people are starting to, but even the studies are so skewed. Okay, so the person says you're more aware about subconscious thoughts that you used to not be aware of. There's all kinds of thoughts showing up that you were never aware of before. Things that were deep down in your subconscious are coming to the surface. Now imagine if you had PTSD or some traumatic experiences in your life that you're trying to get over. You suddenly start having these things come back to the surface. So many more thoughts chatter in your head. I don't think English is this person's first language, so bear with it, okay? So more thoughts will chatter in your head. Very chaotic mind. Every second, your mind will chatter nonstop. Nonstop. Remember what that guy said, that he heard sounds like bees, or almost like a buzzing, like he was standing next to a roaring waterfall. These sounds will disturb your sleep. Feels like a honeycomb of bees, where bees just zzz, right? That's what that guy said. This person says it feels like a honeycomb of bees. It doesn't just sound like bees, it feels like bees. Very, very messy and chaotic mind all of a sudden, okay? That's a little scary, right? With more thoughts, which eventually make you more anxious. So this is increasing their anxiety levels. They have no patience for anything now. It says they're hella annoyed by simple things. The sound of your nose whistling when you exhale. You'll experience very, very loneliness. So increasingly strong feelings of loneliness, even when they're not alone. The mind is filled with so many thoughts that if they don't have somebody to talk to, they might start talking to themselves. People seem to become more and more stupid and dumbass creatures. More and more stupid and dumbass creatures. More annoyed by people. This is supposed to make people have empathy and get along better, right? Isn't that what Goldie Hawn says? The smallest of smallest things will be annoying. The smallest, the tiniest things will annoy you. Well, sure, you got all this chaotic stuff going on in your head. You can't even concentrate or focus on anything. You can't get any sleep, and everything is magnified. You start to observe the smallest bad things of people and start picking on them. You start pulling out bad habits and behaviors. You start noticing spouses or parents or friends, they talk too negative. You start overreacting to almost everything. You start noticing the behaviors very deeply and in detail. There's paranoia. If someone's behind your back and watching you some weird way. This person's in the middle of this still. So apparently they don't realize that what they're experiencing is paranoia. They're convinced that the person behind their back is watching them in a weird way, okay? Meaningless life. Everything seems fake AF. I'm stuck at this place where I don't know how it will be fixed. You know, becoming super annoyed. Their mind is incredibly chaotic. They're depressed. They're paranoid. I'm going to read you another one. This person was also involved in it for a long time. They had a long stretch of meditation. I'm just going to skip down to what happened. basically they quit their job so they could meditate, and they were doing meditation for several months. They did get what they thought were benefits from it, of course, just like the other person. This one tends to try to tell people they should keep doing it, which is ridiculous. And they kept doing it too. After their psychosis, they still went back to meditation. Let's see. They were doing intense meditation, talks, mindful walking, which is bizarre, eating in community, sharing experiences, light work, more meditation, and silence. So they did the whole entering the silence thing too, which is really huge in religious circles. There's the whole be still movement, which is based on misinterpretation of a scripture. So they were doing the following the breath kind of meditation and contemplating body sensations. Basically what they mean by that is they were just focusing on their bodily sensations. All of this is completely abnormal to how our minds were made to work. Just saying, okay? As the weeks went by, their perception of the breath shifted to something more subtle. They really enjoyed the experience, blah, 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 okay? But towards the end of the retreat, they had the feeling of a kind of energy flowing in their body. They felt something moving in their body, an energy moving in their body. I'll tell you what I think it is. Personally, I would think it's demonic. They felt that there were obstructions to the natural flow of the energy flowing through their body. So they would focus with their mind, their attention to try to remove the obstructions. I mean, seriously. So they think they have magical powers now that they can move energies in their body. That's a little bizarre. And this is coming from a person that started off as an atheist. They could feel the obstructions becoming weaker. After finishing the retreat, they went to another center in the UK for a couple of weeks and then continued with the practice. But now instead of 2 short sessions a day, for a couple of weeks, he was spending 6 to 8 hours meditating. Not 5 years, a couple of weeks of meditating for long hours, okay? Eventually, they reached the point where they felt totally clean, whatever that means. And that is when all hell broke loose. While meditating the last day, they could finally see love as an underlying force in the universe. God is the underlying force of the universe. God is love, and he is the one who holds the universe together by his word. You didn't need to do this to find that out. He had a waking dream of some fractal patterns. So he had a waking vision. He's wide awake, and he had a vision of patterns. Fractal patterns. How bizarre. Realigning. At this point, the feeling of being in danger arose in me. The feeling of being in danger. And they ignored it. I dismissed it because I had no grounds to believe in any sort of supernatural agency. Right? He had no reason to think about supernatural beings or anything, right? Because he's an atheist. But after speaking about faith with a friend I met there, I reconsidered it. I decided to let flow my intuition for once. Okay, so now he's considering the possibility of supernatural agency, that there's a supernatural being or entity behind this, right? Decided to let his intuition flow. Well, this is what happens because this is not the God of the universe that he's dealing with. Things started getting weird with my intuition. First, I randomly selected books from the library that I believed were relevant for my quest. Well, that's not random if you're seeking books that you think are relevant. Skimmed some of them until in one of them I found the concept of mega machine. He talks about society acting on blind whims to destroying the planet in the process. Well, first of all, our planet's not being destroyed, but he latched onto this and felt he had to do something about it. So at this point, he says, I was already out of myself. I was already out of myself. My actions were being controlled by my instincts. Well, that's one way of phrasing it. That's probably what he thought, was that it was his own instincts, but I guess he forgot all about that supernatural element, right? rather than by my rational mind. His actions were controlled by instinct rather than by his mind. I would see signs everywhere. I would sense an impending doom, and I had to act urgently. I had a download process where my mind created its own narrative. Our actions are in part taken by our environment. So by creating tiny variations in the environment, I could prevent doom. That was what his brain was telling him, okay, or something else. My craziness had already found its justification. It's still embarrassing to remember all the details, but it can be summarized with one word: delirium. Well, there's another word that can summarize it too. It's called demonization. I was totally out of myself, and what's worse, I was acting in inappropriate ways with other people. Now get this, here is where the violent aspect comes in. For instance, I was being hosted by a girl, and I acted violently, smashing a cup against a wall and throwing a chair to the floor. I still remember how my mind was watching in horror how my body was acting. That indicates no self-control. He threw a cup against a wall, smashed a cup against a wall, threw a chair to the floor, and he says he's sitting there in horror watching himself do this. So he has no control. That's scary, isn't it? What about people that drive over people with their car? Or decide, all of a sudden they run down the road with a gun and shoot up a school? You think maybe that some of that violence could turn to those kind of things? Maybe there's an explanation for what's happening in our society. It doesn't take very many people. Heck, if 1 in 100 people were having this problem, it could still explain that, right? Eventually, when I was running wild in the streets, whirling around and eating flowers, somebody called the police and they brought me to the hospital. So this person basically was put on antipsychotics and after a while slowly gained control. Well, it may or may not be the drugs that helped them gain control. It could be that whatever got influenced this person decided to sit back for a while and let them, have their life back because they're more useful to them outside, not in a mental hospital, okay? Took me several months of low-dose medication, blah, 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 to get back to my older self, rational, grounded, and at peace. Well, if your older self was at peace, why'd you bother with this stuff anyway? But anyhow, obviously it does not bring peace, okay? This is the second instant that we've seen, and there's a lot more stories like that out there, a lot more. I read one, and I wish I could find it for you, where this woman was in a psych ward for 7 years, and the only reason she got out was because she lied to the doctors. Antipsychotics didn't do anything for her. Okay, I think it was that guru, though I have to listen to his whole video to find out if it's the same video because I haven't listened to the whole thing again yet. But I remember hearing the story about this boy in India who decided to do one of the yogic practices for a week. He was on his head doing the meditation. And when he was done, he turned violent and he started attacking people for no reason. And they ended up having to chain him up. It was so bad.
Our lunatic asylums basically are filled up with people who've practiced yoga.
Our lunatic asylums are basically filled up with people who have practiced yoga. He talks about this kundalini burning things as it moves up the spinal column. I remember reading about, first of all, about Jesuits who were demonized using these kinds of practices. I also read about a guy who developed a burning in his chest that would not go away as a result of meditation. And when he talked to the author who he got the stuff from to begin with that promoted this stuff, the guy said there was nothing that could be done about it and that this was a known side effect. A known side effect. Okay. There were also kids in I don't remember if it was the Brownsville revival, the Toronto blessing, one of those things there, where kids that had been involved in that had been led into these kinds of practices, ended up with burning in their chests and went to the hospital and the doctors could not find an actual cause. We're seeing that this stuff is, remember, this is not the only case that's happened, okay? There's quite a few cases and there's people out there calling out for help, trying to get help, okay? So we've talked about a lot of these negative effects, right? And how this is something that Western culture is only finally starting to catch up to, only finally starting to realize that there's these major problems, right? They're bringing it into medical centers now. It's being used by psychiatrists in their practices. They're dealing with people who already have anxiety and stress and psychosis. Yes, they are using these practices even on people who have psychosis already, which is just craziness, right? Their brains are already having issues and they're using this on them.
So Mind Up is, you're into your third year on Mind Up, or
Well, no, we're 10 years.
10 years into it,
Yeah.
and making major impact and headway in the last few years.
Yeah.
You've actually succeeded in getting public schools to adopt mindfulness
Right.
in the classroom.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about that process. Where does it start, and how do you actually engage a student in the classroom?
The students become engaged because of the program. So first of all, we have special needs schools. We have children that are there for abuse, victims of abuse. We have regular schools. We have private schools. We're now moving into medical centers. It doesn't really, this is not specific to one school or even one group of children, right? It isn't, oh, well, these are, distressed children, or these children are, academically challenged, or this one has, some sort of a impairment. No, it works across the board. The teacher, of course, gets trained, right? And then they start out their day with what we call a brain break.
Okay.
Okay, hang on. The teacher gets trained. Are they trained then to deal with an abused child suddenly having their trauma resurface? Are they trained in dealing with special needs kids suddenly hearing voices? Really? I'd like to see how that works out. What about supposed, sudden violent reactions? Right? Like smashing cups into the walls and throwing a chair on the floor. Like that guy did when he said that he was watching himself do these things and had no control. Are they trained to deal with that?
Calms them down, gets them focused, gets them ready for learning. So our teachers are now looking and saying, well, we don't have to tell the kids to quiet down. They've already done it. So they're already paying attention. So that's the first thing. The second thing is they have a brain lesson about the brain and how it works. And that's interesting because they can control that. So it gives them a sense of control. Okay, oh, I'm all over the place. I know what to do. Sit down, breathe, and focus. And
Okay, if all they were doing was sitting down, take a couple deep breaths, go, okay, I need to calm down. That's one thing. That is not what this is. And we'll show you in just a bit.
And then they do mindful of your senses, because when you're mindful of your own senses, you become mindful of others. So it builds empathy, the ability to focus.
It builds empathy? Seriously? Remember, the people we're talking about, right? They were doing this meditation day in, day out, right? The one dude was doing mindful walking. She's talking about mindful tasting, right? They're basically, what they're doing is they're hyper focusing on every little detail. They're forcing their brain to work harder, for one thing, and they're forcing it to unnaturally focus on things that they would never focus on in normal life, right? So they're focusing on every little texture and mouthfeel and taste of something they put in their mouth. They're focusing, hyper focusing on the breath and how it feels going in and out of the body and the lungs and everything, how it feels as it moves along. They're hyper focusing on every little minor detail. And so through doing this, they're well, for one thing, it's completely unnatural, but for another, they're is it possible that this hyper focus is causing the brain to wear down quicker than what it normally would, or that it's like it's crossing wires in the brain because the brain's not used to operating this way? It's not supposed to operate this way, right? They're creating to where people end up with this chaotic mind, right? And they lose control. I mean, that one guy who had been doing the mindful walking and all this other stuff, right? Suddenly he loses control. He loses control. He smashes a cup on the wall at somebody's house that he's staying at. He smashes the chair onto the floor. right? And he says he's horrified as he watches himself do this. He has no control. And they're super annoyed, right? They're super annoyed suddenly with she's talking about building empathy. They're suddenly super annoyed with everyone around them. They see every little thing as like hyper negative about every little thing that's going on. And their mind is racing. Their mind is super chaotic to the point where they can't even sleep at night. And they're super annoyed at everybody else. And this is supposed to cause you to be able to focus on your test and have empathy? I don't think so. I don't think so.
And so forth. And it's all embedded inside the classroom, which means that the classroom is English around mindful tasting, right? Your science is about the brain. In mindful tasting, we deal with obesity issues and what's good to eat. Mm-hmm. And all this is wrapped around social studies and music and, diagramming sentences and mathematics, and all of it's wrapped into curriculum. So this is what makes it a really cool program. Let's do a brain break. Here's how it goes. Oh, find a comfortable place to sit. In your chair, on the floor. Sit up tall. Breathe in so the air can fill your lungs.
Okay, that's enough of that. They're teaching children special needs, abused children, all kinds of children, and they're even bringing it into medical centers. This is in public schools. It's in private schools now. They are teaching kids to do this stuff. And I just showed you what these other people are saying. That guru saying that the mental hospitals, I'm assuming he's in India, saying that their mental hospitals are full of people from practicing this kind of stuff. It gets worse, guys. This is Goldie Hawn at the World Government Summit. World government, as if we have a world government. We don't have a world government. The World Health Organization, the World Government Summit, the World, whatever. We have World Army now, too, apparently. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. She basically is telling them the story of growing up and ending up being in the acting business, and talking about how she really didn't want to be, but she chose it anyway, and how she was stressed and all this other stuff, and she started doing meditation after spending all kinds of time in counseling, so probably the psychiatrist introduced her to this stuff, more than likely, but regardless of whether they did, they do it now. So she basically just talks about how she thinks that this is great for, peace and blah, blah, blah. And she's introducing this to the World Government Summit, trying to get her Mind Up program, not just into the schools throughout the U.S., but now she wants to export it overseas as well. And that's basically what this is all about. I'm not going to bother playing it for you. Mind Up and Be Happy. World Government Summit. How can children overcome today's digital pressure? Digital pressure? What is she even talking about, digital pressure? How about you don't let your kids spend so much time in the digital world? If you're going to let them do something, let them play a game and make sure that it's not promoting and indoctrinating them with all kinds of garbage first. Because a lot of those games promote socialism and stuff. Even World of Warcraft had people standing in line to talk to a town's official, and they're like shouting, "No justice, no peace." I'm like, are you kidding me? I still have the image. I still have the screenshot of that. So yeah, be careful about what you let your kids play and stuff, and talk to them about socialism and stuff. Have a good long talk with your kids about this stuff. Goldie Hawn says we need to figure a way to regulate human behavior on social media. Really? Do we now? They want to regulate our behavior on social media. Who the heck gives her the right to think that she has any business regulating our adult behavior on social media? This is totalitarianism BS. That's what that is. It really irritates me if you can't tell. So for children, this starts at home. And how does it start? How does it start? With her Mind Up program. Oh, I see how it is. So in order to regulate their behavior, what you want to do first is get them to be influenced through this meditation stuff, huh? This is more indoctrination. What do they figure? Maybe if the kid's in an altered state, their propaganda stuff will get into them easier. I don't know what they're thinking. But I'll tell you what, based on all the stuff I just showed you, I don't think that's exactly a good idea to be introducing little children to things that at the very least may be deteriorating their brains. Right? Isn't that what they say brings on psychosis? I'm sure there's a demon aspect to this too. I'm very sure of it. It's a pagan practice, and pagan practices that God says we're not supposed to do, and they draw demons to people. If you look at Deuteronomy chapter 12, verses 29 to 32, it says, when the Lord shall cut off the nations from before you, where you go to possess them, and you succeed them and dwell in their land, take heed to yourself that you're not snared by following after them, after they're ruined or destroyed from before you, and that you do not inquire after their gods, saying, how do these nations worship their gods or serve their gods? Even I will do likewise. You shall not do so unto the Lord your God. You shall not do so to the Lord your God. And then he talks about what these people ended up doing, some of the stuff that they ended up doing. And then he says in the very end, what things soever I command you, God says, observe to do it, you shall not add to it. There's more. He says, don't take away from it either, but he says, you shall not add to the things that he commanded us to observe. And by going after these pagan practices, we are doing exactly what he said not to do. And when you remember that all of God's laws are based on love, they're for our protection. They're for our protection and the protection of the people around us. Remember that guy's violent outburst that he had no control over? Consider that. Consider that. Very strongly consider that. And he did that after only a couple of weeks of doing long periods of meditation. That little boy in India, after doing long periods of meditation, ended up becoming violent. They're teaching these kids to use this as part of their daily life. They're teaching these kids to do this whenever they feel stressed. What if they live in a stressful home? You think they're not going to start doing that for 6-8 hours a day if they live in an environment where that's their only escape? This is at best, this is irresponsible. At most, it's nefarious. This is scary stuff, isn't it? So that's just a little taste. And if you don't believe me still from showing you the stuff that I've shown you, then I want to urge you to go online and start looking at the dark night of the soul stuff. I told you about the woman who'd been in a psych ward for 7 years, and she still wasn't through it. She still had psychosis. She was still hearing voices and experiencing dark visions and whatnot. Let those voices start telling you to go shoot up a school or something, huh?